All right, so welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are diving into this story that sounds like, honestly, something straight out of like a futuristic novel.
Yeah.
Right? An American city that's being built in India along the Yamuna Expressway.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We've got like research articles and economic forecasts and all this stuff. And thankfully, I'm joined by our expert here to help us unpack all this.
Yeah, happy to be here.
It's not just about buildings and investments, though, right? This project kind of gives us this glimpse into how global investment is really starting to shape the future of cities with these like big, ambitious plans for education, culture, and sustainable living, all that.
Yeah, it's definitely an intriguing development. Let's start with the location.
Okay.
So the Yamuna Expressway, which connects Greater Noida to Agra,
Right.
It's already a really important corridor in India.
Yeah.
But with this new Noida International Airport that's scheduled to open, in April 2025,
Yeah.
this whole region is going to become super important on the global scene.
Explode is right. This American city is planned for, get this, a 1,200-acre plot right next to the airport.
Wow.
That's 5 times the size of Central Park, to put it in perspective.
Huge.
And get this, the investment is projected to be $4 billion.
Over the next 6 years.
Yeah, over the next 6 years.
Yeah.
That kind of money really says something about how much confidence there is in this region.
Absolutely. It's a bold statement. And it's not just happening like on its own.
Right.
There are also plans for a Korean city and a Japanese city along the same corridor.
Hold on, wait, but back up a second.
Yeah.
We got 3 international cities all in a row. This is starting to sound less like urban planning and more like some kind of World's Fair,
Yeah.
What's the thinking behind this like city within a city approach?
So think of it this way. Each of these cities aims to attract businesses and residents from their respective countries.
Okay.
So it's creating these like distinct cultural and economic hubs, but within this larger urban fabric.
So are we talking about like walled off enclaves then? Or will there be like actual interaction between these different cities and the existing Indian communities around them?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And one that we will definitely dive into deeper a little bit later.
Okay.
But for now, let's kind of zoom in on just this American city.
Okay.
What will it actually look like and what kind of lifestyle will it offer,
Right. Let's get into the details because we're not just talking about skyscrapers and shopping malls, right?
Well, not just that, no.
Tell me they're planning something more than just a concrete jumble.
Well, they are planning skyscrapers.
Okay.
But the proposals actually highlight this like really interesting blend of modern amenities and sustainable living. Like they're dedicating a pretty big portion, around 100 acres, to what they're calling modern and sustainable group housing.
Okay.
Think like green spaces, efficient design, a real emphasis on community living.
Sustainable housing in a city modeled after American urban planning. It's an interesting juxtaposition, to say the least.
Yeah, it raises a lot of questions about how we even define American urban design in this globalized world,
Yeah.
But the housing is just one piece of it. They're also planning this like 100-acre university focused on management and performing arts.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they're partnering with like leading U.S. institutions to make sure the programs are, top notch.
A university's sustainable housing.
Yeah.
It sounds like they're trying to make like a whole self-contained ecosystem within this American city. What about jobs, though? Are they expecting people to just like commute to other parts of Greater Noida or something?
Not really, no. They're planning skyscrapers for offices, retail, and hospitality, aiming to make the American city a real magnet for international businesses.
So imagine like someone could be working in a high-tech office tower, living in a sustainable apartment, and then like catching a Broadway-style show all in the evening.
Yeah.
Wait, hold on.
All within this American city.
Did you say Broadway-style show? Are they serious about bringing a taste of Broadway to India? That seems like a pretty ambitious undertaking.
Yeah, it does. And they are planning these cultural centers dedicated to performing arts and events.
Okay.
Think concert halls, theaters, exhibition spaces, a place where people can really experience American culture. They're even talking about having cultural exchange programs.
Oh, wow.
With American artists and performers.
So it's not just about like copying American architecture.
Right.
It's about creating like a cultural exchange.
Yeah.
This blend of ideas and experiences.
Yeah.
But I have to ask, are we talking about authentic cultural exchange, or is this more about creating like a sanitized theme park version of American culture?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
And it gets at the heart of what we're trying to unpack here, How do you create a space for genuine cultural interaction, but also be sensitive to the complexities of representing an entire nation's culture?
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance. And it makes me wonder, like, how do these plans even account for the existing Indian communities, you know?
That's a crucial point. We have to consider how these developments might impact the social and economic landscape of the areas surrounding them.
Okay, let's shift gears for a minute and talk about some of the potential ripple effects of this whole project. It's obvious that this American city and these other international zones are going to have a big impact on the region.
Yeah.
But let's start with the most obvious one. What's this going to do to the real estate market?
Well, the demand for housing near the airport is already crazy high.
Yeah.
You add in these international cities with, their fancy amenities and the idea of living in this global community.
Right.
You can bet property values are going to just shoot up.
Yeah.
We're already seeing a huge surge in investment, with developers jumping at the chance to get in on this.
So it sounds like a dream scenario for investors.
Yeah.
But what about the people who actually already live in the area?
Could all this development lead to people being displaced from their homes,
It's a valid concern.
Yeah.
Rapid development often leads to, rising costs of living.
Right.
Which makes it hard for people to stay in their homes.
It's like that classic gentrification story we see in cities all over the world.
Exactly.
New buildings, prices go up.
Yeah.
And the people who were there before get pushed out.
That's why it's so important for developers and policymakers to really consider the social impact of these projects.
Yeah.
They need to make sure there are affordable housing options.
Right.
And that local communities actually benefit from all this economic growth.
It's such a tricky balance to strike,
It is.
You want progress and development, but not if it comes at the expense of the people who already live there.
Right.
It really makes you wonder who benefits from these large-scale projects. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's not just about displacement either.
Right.
There are environmental things to consider, too.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Large-scale construction can really impact the local ecosystem.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We can't forget about the environmental footprint of something this big.
Absolutely. They have to carefully manage things like, waste disposal, water usage, air quality, all that to minimize their impact.
Yeah.
Speaking of environmental concerns, I'm curious about how they plan to make the American city, sustainable.
Right.
They keep talking about these green spaces and sustainable housing, but how do those ideas actually translate into something real?
Yeah, it's easy to say sustainable, but what does that actually look like on the ground? Are they just planting a few trees and calling it a day?
Well, real sustainability needs a more holistic approach.
Okay.
So, for example, they could incorporate solar panels on rooftops, rainwater harvesting systems, design buildings with energy-efficient materials, that kind of thing.
So it's not just about how it looks. It's about actually building those sustainable practices into, the foundation of the city.
Exactly, and it goes beyond just the physical stuff, too.
Yep.
They need to think about things like public transportation options, bike lanes, pedestrian-friendly streets to encourage people to use those modes of transportation.
It's all connected, isn't it?
It is.
The way a city is designed really influences how people live their lives,
Exactly.
how they work, how they interact with the environment.
Yeah, and that brings us back to that idea of cultural integration that we touched on before.
Yeah.
How do you make sure that these international cities don't just become isolated bubbles,
right,
but instead are these vibrant, inclusive spaces where different cultures can actually live together?
Yeah, that's the big question.
It is.
It would be a shame if these cities just become expat bubbles that are totally cut off from the surrounding Indian community.
Right.
So what are they doing to actually try and prevent that?
Well, engaging with the community is key. They need to create opportunities for real interaction and exchange between the people living in these international cities and the local population. This could be, organizing events together, promoting local businesses within these new developments.
Okay.
Maybe even language learning programs, that sort of thing.
It's about building bridges, not walls.
Exactly.
Creating that feeling of a shared community.
Exactly. And it has to go both ways.
Right.
The people living in these international cities will bring their own unique perspectives and experiences, which can enrich the local culture.
Yeah.
But they also have to be open to learning about and embracing the traditions and customs that already exist in India.
It sounds like there's a lot riding on this project.
There is.
It's not just about, building some fancy new buildings.
Right.
It's about creating this sustainable, inclusive, culturally vibrant community that benefits everyone.
You got it.
That's what makes this whole thing so interesting to me. It's like this big experiment in urban planning, and a whole world is watching to see how it turns out.
The American city, the Korean city, the Japanese city, they're all part of this bigger puzzle, you know?
A puzzle that we're still putting together. And what happens with this experiment could really change the way we think about urban planning everywhere.
Absolutely.
Will this model of international collaboration and these themed urban developments become like the norm? It really makes you think, you know, like, what are the ripple effects going to be? Not just locally, but like on a global scale.
It does, yeah. It raises all sorts of questions about like the future of cities in general. You know?
Right.
How do you create a city that's both globally connected, but also has like local roots? How do you make sure everyone benefits from economic growth, not just a few people?
Yeah.
How do you design a city that can actually be sustainable and resilient and adapt to all the challenges of like the 21st century, you know?
These are big questions, man.
They are.
And there aren't any like easy answers.
No.
It's almost like we're seeing the birth of a whole new type of city.
It is.
One where like borders are kind of blurred and cultures are all like smashing together. But how do we make sure it's a good kind of collision, you know? One that makes harmony, not chaos.
That's the key, right? And maybe the answer is like finding that balance between celebrating our differences, but also finding that common ground.
Yeah.
Instead of thinking of it like a melting pot, you know, where everyone just kind of blends into one thing.
Right.
Maybe it's more like a mosaic, where you have all these different cultures, but they keep their own individuality.
I like that, the idea of a city as a mosaic.
Yeah.
It's a much more vibrant image.
It is.
But how do you actually do that? You know, in reality, it's easy to talk about cultural exchange and integration and all that.
Right.
But how do you make that actually happen, especially on a large scale?
That's the challenge. And there's no like magic formula.
Right.
But I think it starts with creating spaces and opportunities for people from different cultures to interact genuinely. It's about understanding each other.
Yeah.
Breaking down those stereotypes we all have.
Right.
And celebrating the richness that diversity brings.
So it's not just about the physical buildings and stuff. It's about building like social connections too.
Exactly.
Creating a feeling of belonging for everybody, no matter where they come from.
Exactly.
And that's what makes this whole project so fascinating to me.
It is.
It's not just an experiment in urban planning.
Right.
It's an experiment in social engineering, too.
It is, and the outcome of this experiment could really change how we design and build cities all over the world.
It really could, yeah. And it makes me wonder, like, what do you think, dear listener?
Yeah, what do you think the ideal global city should look like?
What things should it prioritize? What spaces would it have for cultural exchange and interaction?
How would it balance the needs of all these different people while also creating this shared identity?
You know, the American City and these other projects on the Yamuna Expressway, they're really pushing the boundaries of what we think of as urban planning.
They are. They're making us rethink what a city can be in this globalized world.
And it's not just happening in India either.
No, not all.
This is happening all over the world.
Right.
Cities are becoming more interconnected, more diverse, and way more complex.
And that raises a ton of fascinating questions about what life in cities will be like in the future.
Yeah.
And there are no easy answers, but one thing is clear.
What's that?
The cities of the future are going to be shaped by the choices we make today.
So, like, as you're going about your day, dear listener.
Yeah, take a look around your own city.
What do you see? What do you like? What would you change?
Because ultimately, the future of our cities is in all of our hands, you know?
We need to be informed, engaged, and ready to participate in shaping what our cities look like tomorrow.
And that's what the deep dive is all about. Giving you the knowledge and insights you need to navigate this complex and ever-changing world.
So keep exploring, keep questioning.
And keep diving deep.
Until next time.